The silk fabric felt cool against her fingertips as Naomi Rivers watched the morning light dance through her bedroom window. Today was supposed to be the beginning of forever, the day she would become Mrs. Julian Westbrook. Her reflection in the vintage mirror showed a woman transformed, wrapped in layers of champagne-colored tulle and delicate embroidery that her mother had spent months perfecting. Every stitch carried Grace's love. Every pearl button a prayer for her daughter's happiness. Naomi had always been a dreamer. Growing up in a cramped apartment above her mother's sewing shop, she would press her nose against fashion magazines and imagine a different life. Not because she was unhappy, but because she believed in fairy tales. She believed that somewhere out there, someone was waiting to sweep her off her feet and carry her into a world where money wasn't counted in coins and worry lines didn't appear before 40. Julian Westbrook had seemed like that someone. They met 18 months ago at the boutique, where Naomi worked as a manager. He walked in looking for a gift for his sister, or so he said, and left with Naomi's phone number. Julian was everything she had dreamed about. Sophisticated, successful, and attentive in ways that made her feel seen for the first time. He took her to restaurants where the waiters knew his name, whisked her away for weekends at his cabin upstate, and spoke about their future with such certainty that her doubts felt like betrayals. "You're going to be the most beautiful bride this city has ever seen," Mira announced. Bursting through the door with an armful of flowers, her best friend's enthusiasm was infectious, though Naomi noticed something flickering behind Mira's warm brown eyes. Something that looked almost like sadness. Myra Chen had been by her side since their freshman year of college. When they bonded over terrible cafeteria food and even worse dating advice, they had built their friendship on honesty, late-night conversations, and an unshakable trust that had survived every challenge life threw at them. If anyone understood Naomi's heart, it was Mira. "Are you sure about this?" Mira asked suddenly, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Naomi turned from the mirror, surprised. "What kind of question is that?" "Of course, I'm sure. I love Julian." "I know you do," Mira replied, setting down the flowers with unusual care. "But do you know him? Really know him?" Before Naomi could respond, her mother swept into the room, her face glowing with pride and unshed tears. Grace Rivers had sacrificed everything to give her daughter opportunities. She worked 16-hour days at her sewing shop, her fingers perpetually pricked and scarred. Also, Naomi could attend decent schools and dream bigger dreams. Seeing her daughter marry into wealth and security felt like validation of every sacrifice. Every sleepless night, the small church was packed with nearly 200 guests. Julian's side was filled with sharp-dressed colleagues from the investment firm, country club acquaintances, and business associates whose names Naomi struggled to remember. Her side held her mother's sewing circle, childhood neighbors, and the handful of college friends who had stayed in touch. The contrast was impossible to ignore, like two different worlds forced together under one roof. As Naomi walked down the aisle on her mother's arm, she caught glimpses of faces in the crowd. Some smiled warmly, others studied her with cool assessment, as if calculating whether she was worthy of Julian Westbrook. Her stomach tightened with familiar anxiety, the same feeling she got whenever she stepped into Julian's world. The feeling that she was playing a part wearing a costume, pretending to be someone she wasn't quite ready to become. Julian stood at the altar looking perfect. His tailored suit fit like a second skin, his dark hair swept back to reveal his angular features, and his smile radiated confidence. Next to him stood his cousin Thomas from his firm, and on Naomi's side, Mira held her bouquet with trembling hands. Pastor Reynolds began the ceremony with traditional words about commitment and love. Naomi tried to focus on the moment, to memorize every detail so she could replay it later. But her mind kept wandering to strange inconsistencies she had noticed over the past months. The way Julian never invited her to his apartment, claiming it was being renovated. How he was always unavailable on Sundays, citing work obligations that seemed excessive even for someone in finance. The phone calls he would take in another room, speaking in hushed tones that stopped the moment she entered. "If anyone here has objections to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace," Pastor Reynolds intoned. The silence that followed should have been brief, meaningless. But it stretched on, growing heavier with each passing second. Naomi felt her heart beginning to race, though she couldn't explain why. Then she heard movement behind her. "I object." Mira's voice cut through the church like a blade. Gasps rippled through the congregation. Naomi spun around, her bouquet falling from nerveless fingers, and saw her best friend standing with tears streaming down her face and a manila folder clutched in her shaking hands. "Mira, what are you doing?" Naomi whispered, but her voice was drowned out by Julian's angry shout. "This is insane," Julian snarled, his polished facade cracking. "You have no right to disrupt this ceremony." "I have every right," Mira said, her voice growing stronger despite her tears. "Because Julian Westbrook isn't who he claims to be. He's already married. He has been for 6 years. His wife Cassandra and their 3-year-old daughter live in Connecticut. And he's been using Naomi's savings to pay off gambling debts that could send him to prison." The church erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped, people stood, and somewhere someone's phone began recording. Naomi felt the ground beneath her feet turn liquid. She looked at Julian, waiting for him to laugh, to explain, to make this nightmare stop. Instead, she saw guilt flash across his face before anger replaced it. "You had no right to investigate me," Julian hissed at Mira. "This is none of your business. So it's true?" Naomi heard herself ask. Her voice sounded strange, detached, like it belonged to someone else. "You're married? You have a child?" Mira stepped forward and handed Naomi the folder. Inside were photographs that would haunt her forever. Julian with a beautiful blonde woman wearing a wedding ring. Julian holding a little girl with his eyes. Bank statements showing money transferred from Naomi's account to offshore gambling sites. Police reports documenting complaints filed by previous girlfriends. Each page was another betrayal, another lie exposed. Naomi asked Mira, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. 3 days, Mira admitted. "A former client of Julian's contacted me after seeing your engagement announcement online. She wanted to warn you. I spent every hour since then verifying everything, because I knew what this would do to you. I'm so sorry, Naomi. I wanted to tell you privately. But Julian convinced your mother to move the wedding date up by 2 weeks. I ran out of time." Naomi looked at her mother, who stood frozen with her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her weathered face. She looked at the guests, at their shocked expressions and eager eyes, already composing the gossip they would share. She looked at Julian and finally saw him clearly, not the prince from her fairy tales, but a con artist who had seen her dreams and exploited them. Without a word, she gathered the heavy skirts of her mother's handmade gown and ran. 4 days had passed since Naomi fled the church, and she hadn't left Mira's apartment. The blinds stayed closed, blocking out the world that suddenly felt too harsh, too real. Her phone sat at the bottom of her purse, ignored, while social media exploded with videos of her interrupted wedding. Someone had captured the whole thing, and now strangers across the internet were dissecting her humiliation. Frame by frame, Mira moved through the apartment like a ghost, bringing food that Naomi couldn't eat, making tea that went cold, and sitting in silence when words felt impossible. The guilt radiating from her friend was palpable, but Naomi couldn't find the energy to address it. She was too busy replaying every moment of her relationship with Julian, searching for the signs she had missed. The red flags she had ignored because she wanted the fantasy more than the truth. On the 5th morning, Naomi finally spoke. "Show me everything." Mira hesitated, her hand hovering over her laptop. "Are you sure? Some of it is really hard to see." "I need to understand how blind I was," Naomi replied. Her voice was hollow, scraped clean of emotion. The full picture was worse than she could have imagined. Julian Westbrook wasn't just married. He was a serial con artist who had perfected the art of targeting women like Naomi. Women who worked hard, saved carefully, and dreamed of security. Over the past 8 years, he had defrauded 5 different women, using their money to fund his gambling addiction and maintain his image as a successful banker. The investment firm where he claimed to work? He had been fired 3 years ago for embezzling client funds. The cabin upstate? Rented by the weekend using stolen credit cards. Even his name wasn't entirely real. He was born Julian West, but added the Brook to sound more sophisticated, more trustworthy. But the detail that made Naomi's stomach turn was the file on Cassandra Westbrook. Julian's actual wife knew nothing about his double life. She believed he was a traveling consultant, working long contracts in different cities. She had a 3-year-old daughter named Sophie, who Julian saw perhaps one weekend a month. Cassandra worked as a nurse, supporting their family while Julian drained Naomi's savings account to place bets on sports games and poker tournaments. "There's more," Mira said quietly, pulling up another document. "The woman who contacted me, her name is Patricia. She was engaged to Julian 4 years ago. She lost her entire life savings, had to declare bankruptcy, and he disappeared the day before their wedding. She's been trying to track him down ever since to press charges. But he changes cities, changes details about his life, and moves on to the next target." Naomi felt something crack inside her chest. Why didn't he just leave before the wedding? Why let it get that far? "Because the con works better if he can legally access your finances," Mira explained, her voice thick with anger. "Marriage gives him rights to your assets." Patricia realized what was happening the night before her wedding and confronted him. That's why he ran. He was planning to do the same to you. The apartment felt too small suddenly, the walls pressing in. Naomi stood abruptly, pacing the small living room. "You should have told me the moment you found out. You should have come to me immediately." "I know," Mira whispered. "I thought about it constantly. But Naomi, every time I tried to bring up concerns about Julian over the past year, you shut me down. You accused me of being jealous or unsupportive. I was terrified that if I came to you privately, he would convince you I was lying. He's a professional manipulator. I needed witnesses. I needed it to be undeniable. So you chose the most public, most humiliating option possible." Naomi shot back. "Do you have any idea what it felt like standing there while 200 people watched my life explode?" "Better than spending the rest of your life married to a criminal," Mira said, her own frustration finally breaking through. "Better than waking up one day to find your bank accounts empty, your credit destroyed, and Julian disappeared to his next victim. I saved you, Naomi, even if you hate me for how I did it." The words hung between them, sharp and painful. Naomi wanted to rage, to scream, to break something. Instead, she collapsed back onto the couch, tears finally coming after days of numbness. Mira sat beside her, and they cried together. For the friendship that felt fractured and the innocence that was lost. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. Mira checked the security camera, and her face went pale. "It's Julian." Fear flooded Naomi's system, immediate and overwhelming. "Don't let him in." "I'm calling the police," Mira said, reaching for her phone. But Julian's voice came through the intercom, smooth and desperate. "Naomi, please, just give me 5 minutes. I can explain everything. None of this is what it looks like." "Everything is exactly what it looks like," Mira shouted toward the intercom. "Leave now, or I'm calling the cops." "I need to talk to Naomi," Julian insisted. "Privately. Whatever lies you've told her, I deserve the chance to defend myself." Something shifted in Naomi then. The fear transformed into something harder, sharper. "Let him in, Naomi." "No," Mira protested. "Let him in," Naomi repeated. "I'm done running. I'm done being afraid. He needs to see that his game is over." Mira reluctantly buzzed Julian up, then positioned herself near the door with her phone in hand, ready to call for help. When Julian entered, Naomi barely recognized him. The polished facade had crumbled. His suit was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, and his eyes held a wild desperation that made him look dangerous. "Finally," he said, trying to summon his old charm. "Naomi, sweetheart, this has all been a terrible misunderstanding." "Don't," Naomi said coldly. "Don't call me sweetheart. Don't lie to me anymore. I've seen everything. The other women, the gambling, your real wife and daughter. I know exactly who you are, Julian. Or should I call you Julian West?" His face hardened. "You've been listening to your bitter friend too much." "Mira has always been jealous of what we have," had Naomi corrected. "What we had, which was nothing but lies? Tell me something true, Julian. Just one thing. Were you ever going to stop? Or was I just another name on your list?" For a moment, something almost like regret crossed his features. You were different, Naomi. I actually cared about you. But I have problems. Debts that you can't understand. I needed help. You needed my money, Naomi said. You needed another victim. How much did you take? 20,000? 30? 42,000, Mira supplied quietly. So far, Julian's desperation shifted to anger. You owe me that money. Do you understand what I've given you? The places I've taken you? The life I've shown you? You think a boutique manager could have experienced any of that without me? I'd rather be poor and honest than rich and living a lie, Naomi said. You need to leave now. Cassandra knows about me. She's filing for divorce. Patricia is pressing charges. Your house of cards is collapsing, and I won't be caught in the rubble. You're making a mistake, Julian warned. I have connections. I can make your life very difficult. Mira, call the police, Naomi said calmly. Julian was just threatening me. Certainty in her voice did what fear couldn't. Julian deflated, the fight draining from him. You were supposed to save me, he said quietly. I thought if I could just get settled, start over with someone good and honest, I could stop. I could be better. I'm not responsible for saving you, Naomi replied. That was never my job. Now get out. After Julian left, escorted away by building security, Naomi sat in silence with Mira. The anger she had felt toward her friend was still there, but it was changing shape, becoming something more complex. Hurt mixed with gratitude. Betrayal mixed with understanding. There's something else I need to tell you, Mira said softly. Something I should have admitted years ago. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling. I'm in love with you, Naomi. I have been since college. That's why I investigated Julian so thoroughly. That's why I couldn't stay silent. Not just because you're my best friend, but because watching him hurt you was killing me. Naomi's world tilted once more. Mira. You don't have to say anything, Mira rushed on. I know you don't feel the same way. I know you probably never will. But I couldn't keep hiding it. Not after everything. You deserve honesty from the people who love you, even when that honesty is complicated. Naomi reached out and took Mira's hand. I need time. To process all of this, to figure out who I am without Julian's lies defining me. But Mira, you saved me. However messy and painful it was, you saved me. That means something. They sat together as the sun set. Two friends navigating the complicated territory between love and truth, trying to find solid ground in the wreckage of dreams that should never have been built on lies. 3 months had passed since the wedding that never was, and Naomi had stopped counting the days. She stopped measuring her life by that moment of public devastation and started measuring it by small victories instead. The morning she woke up without immediately checking if Julian had contacted her. The afternoon she walked past the boutique where they met without feeling her chest tighten. The evening she laughed at something genuinely funny and realized it was the first time in weeks. Her mother's sewing shop had become her sanctuary. Grace never asked questions, never pressured her to talk about feelings she wasn't ready to examine. Instead, they worked side by side in comfortable silence. Naomi learning the craft that had sustained their family for generations. There was something healing about creating beauty with her own hands, about taking scraps of fabric and transforming them into something whole and useful. You have a gift for this, Grace said one afternoon, examining a hem Naomi had finished. I always wondered if you would find your way back to it. Back to it? Naomi asked, surprised. Grace smiled, her weathered face softening with memory. When you were little, before your father died, you used to sit at my feet and play with fabric scraps for hours. You made clothes for your dolls, curtains for your dollhouse. You had vision, creativity. Then we lost your father. Money became tight, and you stopped dreaming small dreams. You wanted the big fairy tale instead. Naomi set down her needle, the truth of her mother's words settling into her bones. I thought marrying someone successful meant I wouldn't have to worry anymore, that I could skip the struggle and go straight to security. Security isn't something someone else gives you, Grace said gently. It's something you build for yourself, stitch by stitch, choice by choice. Your father and I didn't have much, but we had something real. I'd rather have had 5 years of honest love than a lifetime of pretty lies. The words stayed with Naomi as she walked home that evening. Mira's apartment had become a temporary refuge, but she knew she couldn't hide there forever. They needed to address the elephant between them, the confession that had shifted their friendship into uncharted territory. She found Mira at her desk, working on a design project, and for a moment just watched her friend. Really saw her for the first time in years. The concentration on her face, the creative passion that had driven her to build a successful freelance career, the loyalty that had made her risk their friendship to protect Naomi from a terrible mistake. When had Naomi stopped noticing these things? When had Julian's world become so consuming that she lost sight of the people who genuinely loved her? "We need to talk," Naomi said. Mira looked up, fear flickering across her face. "Okay." They sat together on the couch, the same spot where so many conversations had happened, where laughter and tears had been shared freely. Naomi took Mira's hand, feeling the slight tremor in her friend's fingers. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Naomi began. "About what you said, about your feelings, and about why I was so desperate to believe in Julian despite all the warning signs." "Naomi, you don't have to explain anything," Mira started, but Naomi squeezed her hand gently. "Yes, I do. Because I've realized something important. I was so busy looking for someone to complete me that I never learned how to be complete on my own. Julian represented security, status, escape from struggle. But Mira, you represent something I didn't value enough. Authenticity, genuine care. Partnership based on who I actually am, not who I could be molded into becoming." Mira's eyes filled with tears. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't know how I feel about you romantically," Naomi admitted honestly. "I'm saying that 18 months with Julian broke something in me. My ability to trust my own judgment, my belief that I deserve honest love. I need time to heal, to rebuild myself from the ground up. But I also know that you're the most important person in my life. You've proven that in ways that terrified you, that cost you sleepless nights, and the risk of losing me entirely." "I'd do it again," Mira said softly. "Every time. I know you would." That's what makes this complicated and beautiful and terrifying all at once. Naomi paused, choosing her words carefully. "I can't promise you romance. I can't promise that my feelings will ever shift the way you want them to. But I can promise honesty. I can promise that I'll figure out who I am without Julian's shadow, and when I do, we'll talk about this again. Really talk about what we could be to each other." Mira nodded, wiping her tears. "That's more than I expected. More than I deserve after keeping secrets." "You kept secrets that saved my life," Naomi corrected. "You risked everything because you loved me enough to protect me from my own bad choices. That kind of love, whether romantic or platonic, is rare. I won't take it for granted again." The months that followed were about rebuilding. Naomi started working with her mother full-time at the sewing shop, discovering a talent for design she had suppressed for years. She created a small collection of custom pieces that caught the attention of a local boutique owner. Soon, she was taking commissions, building a reputation not as Mrs. Julian Westbrook, but as Naomi Rivers, designer and creator. Patricia, the woman who had warned Mira about Julian, reached out with news. Julian had been arrested trying to con another woman in Philadelphia. Multiple charges had been filed: gambling debts, fraud, identity theft. Cassandra had successfully divorced him and was rebuilding her life with support from the women he had victimized. They had formed an unexpected community, healing together. One evening, Naomi invited Mira to the small studio apartment she had finally rented for herself. It wasn't much, just 2 rooms above a bookstore in Brooklyn, but it was entirely hers. No memories of Julian, no borrowed space, just clean walls, waiting to be filled with her own story. "This is perfect," Mira said, walking through the empty rooms. "Very you." "I wanted to show you because you helped me get here," Naomi said. "Not just by exposing Julian, but by believing I was worth saving. I've been thinking about what you said about your feelings. I still don't have all the answers, but I know this. You make me want to be brave. You make me believe that honest love exists, even after everything." Mira turned to face her, hope and caution warring in her expression. "Naomi." "I'm not ready for a relationship," Naomi said quickly. "With anyone. I'm still learning how to be alone without feeling lonely, how to build security that doesn't depend on another person. But maybe when I figure out who I am, We could explore what we might be. Together. I can wait, Mira said simply. However long it takes. They stood in that empty apartment as the sun set. Two women who had survived devastation and were slowly, carefully building something new. Not a fairy tale with guaranteed happy endings, but something better. Something real, something earned, something built on truth instead of pretty lies. Naomi had learned that happy endings weren't about Prince Charming or rescue. They were about rescuing yourself, about building a life that felt authentic, even when it was difficult. She had learned that love wasn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts, but about someone who cared enough to risk everything to protect you from harm. Most importantly, she had learned that the greatest security didn't come from another person's bank account or status or promises. It came from knowing yourself completely, from building skills and relationships and self-worth that couldn't be stolen or destroyed by someone else's lies. As she looked at Mira, at her best friend, who had become something more complex and precious, Naomi felt something unfamiliar. Not hope exactly, but possibility. The future wasn't a fairy tale waiting to be handed to her. It was a blank canvas, and she was finally holding the brush. And that, she realized, was the most beautiful kind of happy ending. The one you created yourself.